New York City, June 14, 2004. The summer air hung thick with anticipation as 40,000 fans packed Madison Square Garden to absolute capacity. Madonna's Reinvention World Tour was in full swing, and nobody in that arena knew they were about to witness the most emotional moment of the entire tour. The stage stood as a technological marvel, combining Victorian aesthetics with futuristic design. Light technicians adjusted their positions. Sound engineers made last-minute level checks. Security personnel surveyed the swelling crowd with watchful eyes. In the darkness, the collective breath of 40,000 souls created an electric current that seemed to pulse through the arena. They had come from everywhere. Some had flown across oceans. Others had spent months saving for tickets. Many had been following Madonna since the beginning, through every reinvention, every controversy, every triumph. This was to be more than just a concert. This was to be a moment in history, a memory they would carry with them for the remainder of their lives. The air conditioning systems of the massive arena struggled against the combined heat of those bodies, against the fever of anticipation that no mechanical system could possibly cool. Families held hands, friends embraced, strangers exchanged glances of mutual understanding. We are here. We are part of this. We will remember this night forever. The house lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd, so complete that it seemed as though time itself had paused to witness what was about to unfold. Then, a single beam of white light cut through the darkness. The opening notes of Vogue began. The crowd erupted in a primal roar that seemed to shake the very foundation of Madison Square Garden. Madonna emerged from below the stage, rising slowly on a hydraulic platform. Her silhouette was immediately recognizable, even before the lights fully revealed her. She stood motionless for several beats, absorbing the energy of the crowd. Her costume was a perfect fusion of equestrian elegance and punk rock defiance. Her posture radiated complete command, every inch the queen she had crowned herself 2 decades earlier. Her gloved hand raised slowly, and the stadium fell silent once more. 40,000 people under the control of a single gesture. When she moved, it was with that precise, almost military grace that had become her trademark. Part dancer, part general, part high priestess of reinvention. The precision of her movements, the sharpness of each gesture, contrasted with the fluid elegance of her transitions, created a visual language that transcended the need for words. The crowd responded to every motion, every subtle shift of her weight, every flick of her wrist as though they were extensions of her own body. The first hour of the show passed in what seemed like minutes, a blur of perfectly choreographed numbers, each more astonishing than the last. Madonna moved like a force of nature, her voice cutting through the massive space, reaching the very last row with the same intimacy as those in the front. Between songs, she would sometimes stand at the edge of the stage, gazing out at the ocean of faces. A slight smirk would play at the corners of her mouth, a look that said she knew exactly the power she wielded. There was a confidence in those moments that came from 3 decades of commanding stages, but also something deeper, a genuine connection with the people who had followed her through every transformation. As the main set approached what everyone assumed would be its conclusion, Madonna stepped to the center microphone. She was slightly out of breath, but energized by the wall of love emanating from the crowd. "New York," she said, her voice carrying that distinctive Michigan accent she'd never quite lost, despite decades in the city. "New York has always been home to me. This city made me who I am." She paused, looking down for a moment. Something shifted in her demeanor. The armor of confidence cracked just slightly, revealing something vulnerable underneath. "When I came to this city in 1978, I was 19 years old. I had $35 in my pocket, and absolutely no idea what I was doing. I was terrified. The crowd, sensing this was different from the usual between-song banter, fell into an attentive hush. But there was someone, Madonna continued, her voice softer now, someone who saw something in me when I was just a scared kid from Michigan. Someone who taught me that dance wasn't just about steps and technique. It was about telling the truth with your body. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a collective intake of breath as speculation began to spread like wildfire. "I haven't seen her in 20 years, Madonna said, and for the first time that night, her voice wavered just slightly. "But she's here tonight, and I'd like to introduce you to the woman who changed my life." The arena held its breath. "Ladies and gentlemen," Madonna said, her voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper that nonetheless carried to every corner of the vast space, "please welcome to the stage Miss Pearl Lang." The explosion of sound that followed was unlike anything Madison Square Garden had contained that night. It was not merely applause or cheers. It was recognition of something sacred about to occur. For a moment, nothing happened, and the anticipation built to an almost unbearable level. Then, from stage left, she appeared. Pearl Lang, 79 years old, moving with the deliberate grace of someone who had spent their entire life in service to dance. Her silver hair was pulled back in the same severe bun she had worn for 6 decades. Her posture was perfect, despite her age. She wore a simple black dress that somehow commanded as much presence as Madonna's elaborate costume. The elegance of her walk, the regal tilt of her chin, the warmth of her presence. She was every inch the legend as she crossed to center stage. Madonna's reaction was captured on the massive screens flanking the stage, a look of pure, unfiltered emotion, not the controlled persona of a performer, but the face of a woman in the presence of the person who had believed in her before anyone else did. When they embraced, time seemed to stand still. It was not merely two performers sharing a stage. It was a moment of genuine human connection, a public display of a deeply private bond. Pearl held Madonna's face in her hands for a moment, looking into her eyes with what could only be described as pride mixed with something fiercer, validation perhaps of the investment she had made in a struggling young dancer so many years ago. Then they both turned to face the audience, hands clasped together, raised high in triumph and gratitude. Madonna turned to address the audience, Pearl's hand still in hers. "In 1979, I was taking classes wherever I could afford them. Sometimes I couldn't afford them at all. I would sneak into the back of studios, watching through windows, trying to learn by observation." Pearl smiled at this, a look that said she'd known all along. One day, Pearl caught me watching her master class at the Pearl Lang Dance Theatre. I thought she was going to call security. Instead, she asked me if I wanted to dance, or if I just wanted to watch. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. I told her I wanted to dance more than anything, but I couldn't afford the class. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said something I've never forgotten. "If you're willing to work, I'm willing to teach. But I don't train performers. I train artists. If you want to learn tricks, go somewhere else." Madonna's voice cracked slightly on the last sentence. That distinction between performer and artist, that's what changed everything for me. Pearl didn't just teach me how to move. She taught me how to mean something when I moved. She turned to Pearl, who stood beside her with tears glistening in her eyes. "Everything you see on this stage tonight," Madonna gestured to the elaborate production around them, "every video, every performance, every time I've tried to say something that matters through movement, that started with you. You told a broke kid from Michigan that being an artist was more important than being famous. Pearl stepped forward to the microphone, and when she spoke, her voice was surprisingly strong, carrying decades of teaching authority. Madonna Louise Ciccone was the most stubborn student I ever had, she said, and the audience laughed. But stubbornness without purpose is just noise. Madonna had purpose. She always knew there was something she needed to say. I just helped her find the language to say it. She turned to Madonna. You asked me to bring something tonight. I brought it. From a small bag someone handed her from off stage, Pearl removed a weathered notebook. Even on the massive screens, you could see it was old. The cover creased and faded. This is Madonna's first choreography notebook, Pearl explained to the audience. From 1979, she left it at the studio when she went to pursue her music career. I kept it all these years. Madonna's hand flew to her mouth, clearly shocked. She had no idea Pearl had preserved this. I kept it because I knew, Pearl said simply. I knew you would do exactly what you've done, and I wanted to be able to give this back to you someday, to remind you where you started. She opened the notebook to a marked page and held it up. The cameras zoomed in, showing pages covered in stick figure drawings, arrows, notes in Madonna's young handwriting. One page was labeled "Express Yourself First Ideas." The crowd gasped audibly. This was 15 years before the Express Yourself video that would become iconic. You were always going to express yourself, Pearl said with a gentle smile. That was never in question. What followed was magic of the purest kind. Pearl Lang, at 79 years old, took her position beside Madonna, and together they performed a piece that Pearl had choreographed specifically for this moment. It was not the high-energy, sexually charged choreography Madonna had become famous for. This was something different, more primal, more essential. Two bodies telling a story about time, about growth, about the passing of knowledge from one generation to another. Madonna moved with a restraint and purity that her fans had rarely seen. No tricks, no provocations, just clean, honest movement that spoke of her technical foundation. Beside her, Pearl moved with the economy and precision that come only from a lifetime of mastery. At times they would mirror each other, Madonna's younger body echoing Pearl's seasoned grace. Other times Pearl would lead, Madonna following with the humility of an eternal student. Then Madonna would take the lead, Pearl watching with evident pride as her student commanded the stage. The piece lasted perhaps 5 minutes, though those in attendance would swear it was both longer and shorter, time becoming meaningless in the presence of something so pure. As their voices joined, they were not singing, but the music seemed to come from their movement itself. The entire arena fell into a hushed reverence. 40,000 people stood in perfect stillness, bearing witness to a moment of artistic communion so genuine that it transcended entertainment and became something approaching the sacred. When it ended, they stood center stage, hands clasped, foreheads touching briefly. An intimate moment projected on massive screens for 40,000 witnesses. The silence that followed was profound. Then applause began, building into a standing ovation that continued for nearly 7 full minutes. Throughout the arena, grown adults wept openly. In the third row, a woman in her 50s stood with tears streaming down her face, one hand pressed to her heart, the other reaching toward the stage. Near the center of the floor section, a father lifted his young daughter onto his shoulders, telling her, remember this forever." Throughout the stadium, strangers turned to one another, exchanging glances of shared wonder, Temporary bonds formed in the presence of something truly extraordinary. Madonna spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. Everything on this stage tonight, every video, every performance, every time I've pushed a boundary or tried something new, it all started with Pearl telling a broke kid from Michigan that being an artist was more important than being famous. She turned to Pearl. You gave me permission to mean something, to not just entertain, but to say something that matters. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me before I believed in myself. Pearl's response was simple, spoken directly to Madonna, but captured by every microphone. You always had something to say, dear. I just helped you find the courage to say it loudly. The two women embraced again, and cameras caught Madonna whispering something in Pearl's ear. Whatever words passed between them were too quiet for even the microphones to capture, but the look they exchanged spoke volumes. Pearl nodded, squeezed Madonna's hand one final time, and slowly exited stage left to another wave of thunderous applause. Madonna stood alone at center stage, holding the old notebook Pearl had left with her. She opened it carefully, looking at her young handwriting, and something like wonder crossed her face. 25 years, she said quietly. 25 years since I wrote in this book. Since I was that scared kid with big dreams and no money. She looked up at the audience, and what she said next would be quoted in articles for years to come. Don't ever let anyone tell you your dreams are too big. Don't ever let anyone convince you that you're not good enough. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who believes in you before you believe in yourself, hold on to them, honor them, because those people change everything. She pressed the notebook to her chest. This notebook isn't just paper and ink. It's proof that someone believed in me when I was nobody. Pearl kept this for 25 years, waiting for the right moment to give it back. That's what real teachers do. They hold on to your potential until you're ready to claim it. The arena erupted in applause again, but Madonna raised her hand for quiet. If you have a teacher who changed your life, call them, find them, thank them, because they're the reason any of us get to do what we love. They're the invisible foundation of every success story. The rest of the concert continued with the explosive energy that had become Madonna's trademark, but something had fundamentally shifted in the atmosphere of Madison Square Garden. There was a sense of having witnessed something rare and precious, a moment of genuine human connection amid the carefully choreographed spectacle of a stadium tour. In the merchandise stands, fans were already asking if there would be commemorative items to mark the surprise appearance. Security guards, normally stoic and focused, could be seen discussing the performance among themselves during breaks, gesturing with unusual animation. Even the technical crew, veterans of countless concerts who had seen it all, stood in the wings with expressions of wonder, knowing they had been part of something that would be talked about for years to come. After the encores, after the final bows, after the last cascade of effects had faded, the crowd lingered. They stood in the aisles, they remained in their seats, they gathered in the concourses, all talking, many still crying, some simply silent in the aftermath of overwhelming emotion. Outside in the plaza, people danced between the barriers, sang with strangers, exchanged contact information with those they had bonded with during the show. The night air was alive with the afterglow of shared experience, with the knowledge that they had been present for something that could never be repeated. In the days that followed, newspapers across the country carried the story. Music magazines rushed special editions, television programs played clips, but for those who had been there, no analysis was necessary. They had felt it in their bodies, in their hearts. Many would tell the story for the rest of their lives, where they were sitting, who they were with. How Pearl Lang walked onto that stage with such dignity. How Madonna's face changed when she saw the notebook. How they danced together. How 40,000 people cried. Years later, after Pearl's passing in 2009, Madonna would dedicate an entire concert to her memory. With tears in her eyes, she would tell the audience, "Pearl taught me that dance is prayer, that every movement should mean something, that being famous is nice, but being truthful is essential." She would explain that the notebook Pearl gave her that night had become one of her most treasured possessions. "It reminds me that I started with nothing but dreams and someone who believed in them. Every time I want to quit, every time the criticism gets too loud, I look at that notebook and remember I was always meant to express myself." In a quiet corner of the New York Public Library for the Performing Arts at Lincoln Center, visitors today can find a small, unassuming display case. Inside, nestled on black velvet, lies a weathered notebook dated 1979. Beside it, a photograph shows the moment it passed from teacher to student on a June night in 2004. The accompanying text is brief, but it ends with a quote from one of thousands of letters the library received when the display was first announced. "I was there that night. I was 32 years old, a struggling dancer who was thinking of giving up. When Pearl Lang walked onto that stage, when she gave Madonna that notebook, when they danced together, I understood something profound. The relationship between teacher and student never ends. The belief someone has in you becomes part of your foundation forever. I didn't quit dancing. I teach now, and I try to be for my students what Pearl was for Madonna, someone who sees their potential before they see it themselves." The letter is signed simply, "A Grateful Witness." If this story moves you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more untold stories from Madonna's life. These moments remind us that behind every icon is a human being, and behind every success is someone who believed first. Comment below. Have you ever had a teacher or mentor who changed your life? Share their name and what they taught you. Your story might inspire someone else to recognize the Pearl Lang in their own life.